we have a lot of opportunities to help one another because calling someone out, it causes shame. And that's not what I want. So I think if we all have that mind shift, then we can start living DEI and bringing people in and being allies for one another.
That's Dr. Shahrzad Nooravi. I'm Kara Duffy, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Culture is the driving force that determines our happiness, where we live, our family life, our communities, and definitely at work. It's often viewed as something that just happens, and that's the farthest from the truth. Great cultures are worked at, they're created, they're managed, it's intentional. Today's incredible guest, Dr. Shahrzad Nooravi, spends her time teaching organizational leaders how to design, create, and maintain the culture they crave. If you're hungry for better culture at your workplace or eager to cause great culture within your business, this is the perfect episode for you. Welcome to the Powerful Ladies Podcast.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, Kara.
I'm excited to have you here today. You are a very powerful human who is committed to changing people and cultures. And I'm really excited for you to share your perspective and how you help people, because I think it's something that is so needed in the world right now. So let's jump in and tell everyone your name, where you are in the world, and what it is that you're up to.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Shahrzad Nooravi. I'm a business psychologist. I work with companies to help them create amazing workplace cultures where employees want to stay and give their all, and they see the senior team walking the talk, and they feel like they're living the dream. I am located in San Diego, California, and at any given point in time, I could be found anywhere in Southern California, LA, Orange County, or San Diego.
I think a lot of people hear what you just said about how you work with companies, and they think there's no way that could work where I work. What do you think when you hear people say, like, love this idea, but you haven't been to my company yet?
I think that's a fair comment to make because culture starts at the top. And if people have tried to make a positive change and they are not listened to at the top or they don't see change happening, then that would be a fair thing to say that this is not easy. And I would agree, it's not easy. And that's why my approach is to start with the top and align the senior team and have them take an honest look at everything that's going beautifully in the culture and the things that can be changed to make it more powerful. And one of the things I found myself saying time and time again over the years is a powerful culture starts with you. And that's what ended up being the title of the book I wrote on how to create a great culture.
You know, I think for those of us who kind of live in these spaces, we get why that is the title. But I think so many people who want to change culture don't realize that they're at the epicenter of how to make that change happen. How often are you having to kind of knock on the heads of the leaders and be like, no, it's not from the bottoms up, it's from you?
Certainly, it may feel daunting at first, and that's why we have experts like myself and the things that you do to help leaders see the how. You know, they may envision an outcome where they don't have this revolving door of employees coming and going, which is so expensive and tiring and time consuming. So they may envision what it could look like, but they don't know the how, and why would they, right? For every problem, there's people who are trained professionals to help with it. So as long as the person has an openness to seeing that perhaps part of the great things are from him or her, but also perhaps part of the challenges. And that's something I always make sure to ask, if in my interviews with a sample of formal leaders and informal leaders, I learn there's something you might be doing that's contributing to the challenge. Would you be okay hearing it and wanting to do something about it? So it's a very open conversation that I have. And honestly, it's quite natural. No one is perfect. And the culture is a mirror to the leader of their best qualities and then the things that could be better.
What are some common mistakes that you see companies making that are really limiting their ability for their ideal culture to come to life?
So, one that comes to mind that happens quite often is inadvertently reinforcing the wrong behaviors. So, for example, if you have a high performing leader who doesn't treat people well, who does not role model the behaviors or the values, leaders feel compelled to still keep that person because they are bringing in a big chunk of revenue. And I'm sure you've seen it in your years of experience in big companies. And that's a big mistake because not only are you teaching that person it's okay to be rude to others and have terrible behavior, and of course they're perfect with clients, um, but you're saying something with not having consequences, right? And so then it starts, our behaviors are contagious, our emotions are contagious, so it starts to spread. So certainly that's one. Another one is not being aligned with your senior team. So in the room, everyone agrees to something, and then they go back to their cross-functional departments and say different things. And it's unsettling to our nervous system when we see our leaders saying different things or not walking the talk. Third one is definitely about walking the talk. I've seen so many times in the beginning of my work where um, a team member will say, last week we literally talked about customer care, and then this week our CEO put someone who's a smaller client but a great client in the end of the production line because a big new client came along and we really need to negotiate and change that behavior. There's so many, Kara. I mean, I could I could just be on 1 through 100 by the end of this podcast. But I would say the biggest thing is if leaders are open to seeking input and truly being open to it. So many leaders will say, I ask for input, and people say, no, it's fine, everything's fine. There's something about your behavior that's causing them to say that. Maybe you one time received feedback and you said something that came across as defensive, or maybe they shared some things that you could do and none of them were done. Of course, we don't expect everything to be done, but certainly a summary back of what you've heard and taking some action. So I think the biggest thing is openness to hearing people and actually doing something about it and always walking the talk.
I experience with a lot of my clients that they are very heart led. They care a lot about their teams. They've been on teams that have been bad examples, and they really want to be seen as a good boss. And often I'm telling them that they're being too nice because they aren't being leaders. Um, it's almost like a bad parenting example where suddenly their team is in charge and they're not. For people who are not having those boundaries or not submitting to their leadership, how would you recommend reorienting them so that they can be compassionate, but they can also be leaders at the same time?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the challenges in leadership that I talk about in my book, and this is the all heart leader. And let's talk about the strengths for a moment. Leaders like this create really warm cultures. They're very positive. They take time to celebrate employees and their achievements. They ask about their families. There's many beautiful things to this style. And the question is, how do you keep it in the strength zone? And what happens is the strength becomes overplayed into a weakness. And with these leaders, like you said, there's a lack of boundaries, there's a lack of holding people responsible, lack of giving consequences, and a few things that I think are very important for the leader to process before taking steps. And I start with baby steps, but before taking baby steps to try new ways of showing up, I think it's important to reflect on how you came to this style, right? Because it has to do with our gender, our family of origin, our culture, the environments we've been in. And so taking a moment to deconstruct and ask oneself, how did I get here? What were the great things about the style? And, what about my style is not helping? What are the consequences to the business? And so I think it's really important to think that through because when we understand how we came to a certain style, we can appreciate ourselves, and not beat ourselves up. But it's also something that gives us momentum to think about how do we add to this style. And a lot of times people think the big heart leader thinks, oh, I have to act like someone else, or I have to be like these other um, really unkind bosses I've had. And that's not the truth at all. You could be authentic and kind and have boundaries. And it's so much of it is preventative when, let's say it's around timelines that you just sit down with the person and together come up with it. And some people are extremely focused and organized and they'll be fine. And some people are a little bit more pressure prompted and they may run late. And the question is, how do you, on the front end, put the time around that topic of timelines to come up with the timelines together and ask, how can I support you? And all these things. And then you have something to talk to the person about. Hey, we said it's going to be due on Thursday. It's Thursday. Can you help me understand what happened? And there's a lot of techniques for c- communicating your displeasure and still being yourself. And as I work on this with clients and in workshops, people say, I feel like I could use this at home. And yeah, absolutely, because we could be a whole person at work, at home, in our community. So all of this applies.
Mhm. I love that you brought that up because so often the examples I'll be using in different communication techniques, I'll use personal examples because there's something about making it about the dishes or another kind of often debated family chore that kind of allows it to remove it from the workplace environment so people can really listen and laugh about it a little bit too. I think what's also coming up a lot is there is they're calling it generational differences. Either like I'm Gen X and my whole team is Gen Z. They're so emotional. Or I'm millennial leader, my team is Gen Z. They just don't want to do work. And I have to keep stopping them because while there can be some hacks to understanding what generation someone is in, everyone is such an individual. And I also see that there are some extra, maybe professional trainings that are required for younger people because of gaps that have happened because of COVID, working remotely in general. There's a little bit less of seasoned professionals passing down day-to-day professional habits because people aren't in the same spaces necessarily. But when someone comes to you and they say, oh, the issue is it's that generation, like how do you get them to reset that and see it for what it is versus almost like a pass, give it up. It's we can't fix it because it's a generational issue.
A couple things. So every generation complains about the one that comes after them. So I'm Gen X, and when people actually started using the terms work-life balance and not wanting to be in organizations that promoted work-addicted behavior, Gen X was called lazy, right? And then as because as the workplace evolves, as technology evolves, as history evolves, and the socio-political environment evolves, people change and they respond to their environment. So each generation should be different, and each generation has brilliant gifts that they bring. And so one is to remember every generation comments on the ones after them. But more importantly, I think it's important to understand, just as it's important to understand, like I was talking about the all heart leader. Where did this come from? Let's deconstruct and understand why would a whole generation have similar behaviors? And instead of complaining about it, to educate ourselves about it and talk to people who are in this generation, in this age, and see where there is brilliance, see where you can gain helpful information from them to create a better culture. Um, I remember years and years ago, my father would tell me it's always important to know what's going on with the next generation. Talk to them, ask them questions. And he didn't have the attitude of, um, we know better or older people know better. So I think it's important to just move forward with curiosity and tailor your approach to meet them where they are. And like in the biggest nutshell, I think that is so important because it's such a go-to human behavior to judge. And if we pause and seek to learn and get the buy-in of people who can help your organization from that generation, you're going to find success. You know, complaining is not going to solve anything. It just makes everyone feel bad.
Amen. Yeah, I think, I had the pleasure of getting to hear you speak for a women's group. And there have been so many changes in the past couple of months about DEI and where it's okay and where it's not, and which companies are supporting it and which ones aren't. For people who feel that they are in a minority group and they're not maybe as protected as they used to feel at work, or, they feel that they have to kind of reframe what they're talking about so that they can still solve issues, whether it's with their manager, HR, if their company is no longer supporting DEI practices. How would you recommend they navigate the realities that still exist for minority groups in corporate spaces, and this new space where it's almost like that's not a reason for, like, I'm going to rephrase this in the sense that some people feel like with some companies walking away from DEI support, that they can't talk about the things that are still happening that would have fit into those buckets before. So how would you encourage them to find their voice or maybe reframe it so that they can still feel safe and supported and be contributors in those environments?
I think DEI is about our humanity and how we treat each other and how we make sure to include others in the conversation. And we all have to be allies for one another, regardless of our background. And if we give an example of someone speaking up in a room and someone criticizing them, right? For example, I just spoke with someone who shared that she introduced herself and she pronounced her last name in the way that it would be in Spanish. And someone corrected her and said, well, can you just say it in a way that everyone could say it? And I find that this is a learning moment. This is a coaching moment. And I think it's so important that we practice. And I have a sun model, which is about being still, understanding, and non attached, that we decide we have self love and will not get activated by other people's comments or however they were raised, whatever environments they've been around. And the most important thing is to make sure to speak our voice and in a way that's respectful, right? And this, if this had happened, if I was in a room, and it takes courage to speak up, we have to be allies for one another. I would say something. I would say, that is actually the pronunciation. And I think it's beautiful to pronounce our names the way that they were given. So maybe we could all do that with one another because our names are so important. And so it's to share our voice and to do it in a way that brings people in, right? Calls people in, not calls people out. And, if we've planted a seed for that person, that's all we can ask for. And if they choose to continue behaving in that way, that's on them. But to know you've shared your voice in a public way and hopefully others would speak up, but also in a respectful way, in a truly respectful way, and maybe have a conversation later and explain that because if a person makes a comment like that, maybe they're not familiar with, different names and how they sound, or that person might think, oh, I wonder why they said their name like that. And I just think we have a lot of opportunities to help one another and learn from one another because calling someone out, it causes shame and they don't feel good about you or anything about you. And that's not what I want. I would want us to build bridges. I want us to talk about our humanity. So I think if we all have that mind shift, then we can start living DEI and bringing people in and being allies for one another. And it in many companies it starts from the bottom up as well, and people wanting to be better and different. So I think we bring people along rather than judge them.
There's so much power in that safety first type of component that you're discussing for the humanity side. And if people don't feel safe on either side, there's no listening for whatever the next thing that's going to
exactly
be discussed. Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. And, when I'm in rooms where diversity is the topic or how can we be more inclusive, the question I ask is, how do we bring people in this room who have different perspectives and let's all talk about it? Right? Because if you want to create positive change, you have to have diversity of thought and people who may say, well, I don't like this. Well, let's talk about it. We can't be afraid. We can't be, I mean, this is my opinion, and I could just speak for myself. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to not include people because they may think differently. How can we build together is the question. I think that's what's next in the DEI movement is bringing people along together.
Well, and whenever I'm in those situations, I always go back to the don't get furious, get curious. Like the more that we can reposition instead of being horrified at what people say sometimes, being like, just really being curious, like, wow, that surprised me. Where did that come from? What makes you say that? And I try to do this as much as I can. And of course, being the best version of ourselves is always harder when we're exhausted and stressed out and overwhelmed.
The goal is the higher self. And we mustn't be starving, fatigued, stressed out.
Yeah. Yeah. And
it takes work. Yeah.
It does. So what are some practices that you're doing so that you can stay in this higher space? Because you have to hold this container for so many other people.
All day long. Exactly. That's a great question. So, being in a helping profession as an executive coach, as someone who creates a safe space for people to share their authentic emotions and their thoughts as we process through their challenges. Self care on the part of a coach is so important. And I do a lot of different things for energy management. And this includes sleep hygiene, making sure to do everything to wrap up and have a wind down time before bed because then you could wake up earlier. Um, Meal planning. Notice I didn't say healthy eating. Meal planning. If you plan your meals, it's likely to be healthy, whatever it is that you do for that. Um, Time management, making sure you're taking time to um, look at your calendar and ask what things do you not need to be doing that are taking up your time? What meetings can you have other people go to and report back, or should you just not be in? Um, and then mindfulness, taking time to get centered, and mindfulness and fitness, making time to take a power walk, even when you don't have a lot of time, fitting time for the gym. And there's seasons in our life, it's so difficult, right? But doing your best to fit that in because all of these things collectively help you feel better. And what I'm sharing is not just for me as a coach, it's for everyone, but particularly when I show up, in person or on the Zoom, I have done a lot of work to make sure I'm fully present. Mornings, I have my juice or my smoothie, something with protein. Hopefully I've worked out, I'm ready to go. And that's all by design. And the more we can manage our energy, not only will we be more productive, we'll also be more present and happy.
Mhm. Well, and Taylor Swift's making all sorts of waves right now because she was just on the Kelsey Brothers podcast and she dropped that quote about really protecting your energy and making sure you're giving it to people and places that are matching what you're up to and are worthy. And I think, especially in a corporate environment, it can be so easy to be surrounded and unintentionally giving your energy away to energy vampires. And I love this idea of like, what are we doing to make sure that our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual selves are at the best they can be each day so that we're in the position of like who we get to share that with. Because otherwise, it's so easy to start your day off and not even on the wrong foot, but just in a position of off balance. And so we can't catch up on those days usually because we're just trying to get back to neutrality, let alone empowered.
Yeah, and I would add one thing about energy vampires. One of the common behaviors is complaining and not being open to change. So a lot of times people will want attention for a perceived challenge. And if you coach them and talk to them and ask them open-ended questions, and those of us in the helping profession fall into, the role of the savior in the drama triangle, and the person is the victim and someone else is the persecutor. And listening to the same person talk about the same issues and not taking action over and over again is a very common pattern. And that's one example of what an energy vampire would do. So I think it's important to know where is it that the person is not ready to take accountability and they just want to have your ear and complain. And when you tell them, we've talked about this multiple times and you haven't done anything. So at this moment, I don't really want to talk about it anymore. And that's an honest, loving thing to say that also protects your energy and could be a wake-up call to that person.
This is also what makes me so thankful I'm a coach and not a therapist because I so much more appreciate being in a forward, action oriented solution space. I don't know that I, as a human, have the capacity to just keep listening.
I mean, God bless people who do therapy and are clinical psychologists. My
Hmm.
mom went back to school midlife and became one. And it's her personality. And she's so patient and tough and resilient. And I was a psychology major in college and loved everything I learned from the psychology of old age to abnormal psych to child developmental psychology. But I knew uh, being in a profession where you're trying to get someone from anywhere from negative 10 to zero, if zero is balanced, I knew it was so important, but I thought I would not be good at it, that it would be very draining to me. And so, those of us who've been fortunate to find ourselves in the space taking people from zero to 10 and where we could empower people and they change systems that they're in, that is something that is a better match, right? For those of us in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, when if we go back to 8-year-old you, would she have imagined that she's now an author and running this great business and helping people in this way?
I don't, I think at 8, I wanted to be a news reporter and I did get a journalism degree and wrote for the school paper and beyond. But I'll tell you, I recently found an autobiography I wrote at 15
Love
where I
that.
talked about my siblings and I said they're mostly okay, my two little brothers and in it I wrote that I wanted to be a psychologist or a fashion designer. And this is me at 15 and I went back to school and became a business psychologist and I'm obsessed with fashion and this includes thrift shops, consignment, um, redesigning things, and now I'm playing around with designing a couple things. So I think children know at an early age what their interests are, and parents need to just guide them along and let them explore and see what makes them excited.
What has been pivotal in your career journey that made you realize I am absolutely on the right path?
I moved from LA to Chicago when I got married, and I was doing a lot of consulting work in that time. And I knew I, there was more that I could do. And I was consulting for other people's companies, and I sort of pictured my own website, but I just didn't know how I would go about it. But I did kind of picture it. And when I came back to California, I went back to school to earn my doctorate of psychology and organization development. And it was in that program, which was taught by practitioners. So these were not just academics, they were also consultants. So that was the start of me saying, okay, I am now, this is the right path. And they would say things like, to start your own company, you just need one client. And they made it so beautiful and doable. And when I finished the program, I did go and talk to one client and authentically, after I listened to the person share their challenges and things they wanted to be differently, to be done differently, I shared, here are 3 things that I recommend. And I didn't have any business development training or anything, but I knew my craft very well. And he said, can you come back this time next week with that in a proposal? And you always need to say yes. I didn't have a company name. I didn't have a website, but I had my craft. And I said, sure. And that was the beginning. That was when it all crystallized very quickly. and I launched my company and learned everything I needed to along the way and listened to my clients when they said, you need to start giving talks, you need to start making videos. Can you write a book? Can you make this book in audio, but also your voice? So I'm always listening. And I think it was that first time of saying yes that I discovered that I was holding myself back, thinking, well, how will I start a business? I already had it in me and I did it. And that was 2010. So a while ago.
You occur to me as someone who has so much self confidence and courage and the curiosity to solve the problem, like continues to kind of guide you down this really nice path. Do you feel like those are like, is that how you were sprung into this world, or are those things that you've acquired? And is there a trait that you think I've missed that really has been a defining trait for you in getting to you to where you are today?
I think part of it comes from having watched my parents. My father was an entrepreneur. My mother is the biggest entrepreneur. And I remember this one time I was struggling. It was when I first started my business. I was also doing fundraising for an organization named Room to Read. They build schools and libraries in developing countries, which is especially important for young girls, right? After sixth grade, if they don't have school, that's a big problem for their whole community and their society. Um, I was also working on creating safety in my neighborhood on a big project. And I was crying on the phone to my dad because I'm trying to do these three big things at the same time. And it was just frustrating. And he listened to me. And in the end, he just said, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. And it was so simple and beautiful. And that was it. And so those types of positive messages from him, from my mom saying, start your business, duh, what are you waiting for? Those those kinds of things definitely stay with me. And and I'm just very driven. If there's something that needs to be done, whether it's for myself, for my community, for helping a client, I will go all the way. I'll get obsessed, as my husband says, but I think it's in the best way.
Of course. Well, and I think it also becomes like you know there's the solution. You can see it. So it's like, why aren't we implementing that component? Um, some of the hardest work I've done in this role as coach has been knowing how to stay on my side of the street and not be more like to take over and just like create what I know is possible for someone else's business because I can see it, I can do it. And it's like, no, we have to, there's so much of the pushing the power over. Here's the guidance. What would you do? Like, I know that I want to be empowering people, but sometimes my own frustration with what I can see versus what they can't is like what I have to battle, like the patience of it and allowing them to discover what they need to discover on their own pace. Now, of course, I'm like making recommendations and trying to show it. And here's other things to support it and make it happen faster because it's part of what I'm being paid for. But there's beauty in allowing the space to be frustrated. And I recently read a book about raising children, how this woman was saying that anxiety is often running from a feeling we don't think we're supposed to have. And
Mm.
how can we sit with kids in that feeling that we as, parents, adults, whomever might not want them to be feeling? Like we don't need to move them from being sad like you were when you called your dad. Like he didn't move you to the happiness bench. He just sat there with you. And like how is building resiliency in people to be like, it's okay to be on this bench right now.
Yeah, here's the thing. we have to give space for people to feel the discomfort and to be there with them, to ask the open-ended questions, to let them know they have our support and it's their journey. So I think the word you may be describing is non-attachment. It's not overly attached or dependent, and it's not detached. It's non-attached, where you are supporting the person and knowing this is their journey, and not getting caught up and being overly helpful, which people in helping professions can do, but knowing that a conversation where you ask the right question and you're silent and you give space to think, which is such a gift that we can all give each other, magic can happen there. Or the person says, I don't feel like it right now. Can we talk about this later? Sure. Reflect on it, doodle on it, think about it, and making it okay for people to go at their pace if it's something that they need to spend more time with.
Well, yeah, because you and I both know that when we're rushing through things, we're not processing something, it doesn't go away. It starts building into this mountain or this backpack that we don't actually want.
I talk about the backpack and what do you want in it? Do you want to be carrying around something light and beautiful with sustenance? Or do you want to carry this bag of rocks? Because that's what anxiety is. That's what happens when we're so stuck in the past, ruminating, or we're stuck in the future, thinking about what's going to happen. And I recommend to your listeners, I recommend to my clients over the years to study mindfulness. And that's about getting grounded in the present moment. And it takes time and practice, and we could do it in many different ways. And when we do, we are lighter, we feel more joy, we feel more confident. And I think that's a part of one's growth, that when we rewire these neural pathways toward presence, we just experience life differently.
Mm-hmm. A few questions to wrap up for today. The first is, how do you define powerful in ladies, and do their definitions change when they're next to each other?
Mm. How do I define powerful ladies? Powerful ladies love themselves. They have the courage to speak up when it's important. They support one another and others. Powerful ladies go for it, even when you're not positive, even if you feel like, am I the one? When I was writing my first book, one of my book coaches said that men will write books after a short period of time and experience, and women can have doctorate degrees and all these years of experience, and they'll say, am I the one to write this? So there's a part of being a powerful lady that you trust. You trust your voice. And when powerful ladies are together, it's just a beautiful thing. And it's an environment where you can create community together and bring new outcomes.
Where would you put yourself on the powerful lady scale? If 0 is average everyday human and 10 is the most powerful lady you can imagine, where would you rank yourself today and on an average day?
Pretty high up there, because I've worked all my life to get there. And I feel that I can make a difference in every environment I'm in. And we should do that. We should leave every environment better than we found it. And it takes time and practice to learn to speak one's voice and stand up for what one believes in. And I'm up there and I want everyone else to be up there.
For people who love the wisdom you're sharing and want to be able to work with you, connect with you, what are the ways that they can find you, but also what are the ways that they can actually choose to work with you? What are some options?
So I could be found at strategymeetsperformance.com. Uh, the way that I work with people is one-on-one executive coaching, and this is an opportunity to help a person level up in their career path. And I also work with the C-suite of mid-sized companies and help them take an honest look at their culture and all the things that can make it really powerful where people want to stay and give their all.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your wisdom with us today, to be a guest to me and Powerful Ladies. It's always a pleasure getting to spend some time with you. And just, I want to honor you for the work that you're doing. You have put so much work into who you have to be to create spaces for people. And then you hold such big spaces for these people who are creating ripple effects, not just through their corporate places, but through their communities at a 360 level. So thank you for choosing that path and being so generous with your talents and wisdom to truly change the world that you have access to impact. I wish more people were using their power the way that you are.
And thank you, and congrats to having this podcast since 2019. That is amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend. Head to thepowerfulladies.com, where you can find all the links that connect with Shahrzad, Strategy Meets Performance, and get her book, A Powerful Culture Starts With You. Come hang out with Powerful Ladies on Instagram at Powerful Ladies, and you can find me and all my socials at karaduffy.com. This episode is produced by Amanda Cass, and our audio engineer is Jordan Duffy. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I hope you're taking on being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love.